All right, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. Today we have a very special guest, Scotty Saks. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Vem, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on Blood Money.
Thank you so much for coming on to the Blood Money podcast. So, Scotty, just a quick little background on Scotty here. So, what I find really fascinating about Scotty is actually Scotty and I have very similar backgrounds. We both come from Hollywood. We both worked within the Hollywood world, producing shows and really having an inside scoop on what's happening. So, this conversation we're about to have before the podcast, we started talking about essentially it's 9/11 today, even though this episode is probably going to air a few days later. And we're talking about how, 9/11 was most likely an inside job, and a lot of calamities that have happened to this country and to the people of this country have actually been inside jobs. So, Scotty, on that note, why don't you take over and tell us a little bit about your background and what you've observed coming up in the entertainment industry?
Well, Vem, be glad to share a little bit of my background and how we got here today. Yes, I've been in mainstream media, music industry, Hollywood, all facets of entertainment for about 40 years now. I've done everything from produce and syndicate radio and TV programming to negotiate over $1 billion of advertising and sponsorship deals. And as I'm sure you traveled around the industry, got invited to a lot of parties, a lot of events. We both probably saw a lot of things. And I think the best way to frame up our conversation today is to share a couple of anecdotes, which really will shed some light on how we got to where we're at in 2023 and how all these false flag events, these inside jobs, why and how they occur. So, let me start by sharing a story. In the late 80s, I was invited to, I'm invited every year to an ABC fall preview party where the ABC network presents its fall new programming to the advertising community. So I showed up to this particular event. It was 1989, 1990. I can't remember the exact year. I showed up late. There were about 100 tables of 10 people, so about 1,000 people there, and every seat was full except for one table all the way in the back in which one man was sitting. I sat down at that table. I ran to the buffet. They were closing the food down. That was my priority at 29, get some food in me. And I started to eat my food, and I looked up at the man to start conversing with the man sitting across from me. And lo and behold, it was Peter Jennings, the great ABC newscaster. For 10 years, he had the number one rated newscast at 6 o'clock. And so Peter and I began to talk as you would at an event like this. And Peter was drinking. And I waited till he had 4 or 5 drinks in him to ask him about my grandfather, Vem, who despised, hated Peter Jennings. My grandfather survived the Holocaust, escaped from a concentration camp with the help of the Red Cross, who was once, I believe, a good organization. But my grandfather hated Peter Jennings. He said he was an anti Semitic Jew hater. So I thought as I'm sitting there and Peter and I are talking, I'll never have a chance to ask him again about my grandfather. So I laid it on him. I waited till he had about 4 or 5 drinks. I said, Peter, my grandfather hated you. He said you were an anti Semitic Jew hater. And he threw things at the TV at you, even threw a lit cigar butt one time. My grandmother freaked out because the cigar butt was lit, and he just flicked it at the TV at you. And he said, God damn, Peter Jennings. So, Peter, what say you about my grandfather's thoughts? And his response, Vem, was striking and was twofold. He said, first of all, your grandfather's a perceptive man. While I'm not a Jew hater and I was never anti-Semitic, when I was a rookie reporter, I did not get hotel rooms. I got a host family. My host family was Arabic Palestinian, and I broke bread with them for 18 months. He said, I suffered a human emotion called sympathizing. I sympathize in the Arab-Israeli conflict. I sympathize with the Arabs and the Palestinians. He said, you would too if you broke bread with someone for 18 months. But then what he said is the point of this conversation, Vem. He said, but Scotty, it doesn't matter what I thought, or for that matter, what you or your grandfather think. He said, because everything we see and hear on TV and radio is a media construct and a narrative. It's all to serve an agenda. And I was, just floored by that remark. I asked him to repeat it to make sure I understood it. And he said, yes, everything we see on TV is a media construct and a narrative, even his newscast, because he said, after all, I'm just reading talking points. And we'll come back to those talking points with another story later. Mm-hmm. So hold that thought. We have a media that's for 70 years has framed the news and framed the narrative to fit their agenda. In a couple years later, doing business with Johnny Cash, as I was telling you earlier, syndicating a radio show called Johnny Cash American Folklore. And my job was to get it on radio stations and negotiate with his record label the rights to use the music which they owned. So I did those two things very well, I might add. We cleared 200 radio stations. Every country radio station in America wanted Johnny Cash's programming. It was the easiest layup I ever had in business trying to get this show on the air. And you're probably somewhat familiar with syndication. Can be a very dog-eat-dog tough business, but this was an easy layup. So backstage at an event one night, Johnny's on stage playing. I'm with Johnny Cash's wife, June Carter Cash, and a few friends. And she's introducing me to her friends, and she's bragging on me and telling her friends what I did. And she said, Johnny and I are so grateful for Scotty filling the role that Johnny won't play anymore. And I interrupted her. I said, no, wait a minute, June. I'm 29 years old. I'm making good money. I'm working with people like Johnny Cash. And he was introducing me to other people like Kenny Rogers and other great artists. And I said, I really need to thank you, June. She said, no, Scotty, you don't understand something. Johnny will not work with the media and the music industry anymore. He will not do business with them. So you're filling a role he can't do. So, of course, I asked her, why won't Johnny do business with the media and the music industry anymore? And her answer floored me. She gave me one of these. She said, Scotty, because they're a Luciferian satanic cult, and Johnny doesn't want to be a part of it. So if we take those two anecdotes and we put them together, we've got a media, the bullhorn for the deep state cabal, the central banking cabal that owns 90% of the media. We have a bullhorn that constructs the news and the narrative to frame for their agenda. And we have a Luciferian cult that's running the show. Is it any wonder we are where we're at today, Vem? It's why we're in the situation we're in 2023 and why they've been able to get away with 9/11, the Haina fires, and the other, events over the years, the JFK assassination, all these so-called conspiracy theories, which you and I now know are really just conspiracies on their part. They conspired to pull these things off. One more quick thought, just to really put an exclamation point. So in 2014, we had this thing in Ferguson, Missouri, with a boy named Michael Brown. He was a teenager. I think he was 19 years old. He had just finished a drug deal and had, I think, robbed a convenience store, something to that effect. The media narrative was he was a good kid. He found Jesus. He was a good member of the community now. The complete antithesis of who this boy really was. And he was murdered by the police. And it was kind of a George Floyd. It was George Floyd 1.0. It was a George Floyd event where they used it to divide and conquer us, right? To divide us by race. And I was at CBS TV the day after that happened. And I was with the program news director, who was a friend of mine. My wife was best friend growing up, was married to this guy. So after negotiating a deal with CBS TV, he and I went to lunch. We came back from lunch. He had a memo on his desk. He picked up the memo. He starts swearing, God damn, I'm not doing the story like this. This is all bullshit. He calls his boss on the phone. He says, hey, I got the memo with the talking points for the Michael Brown story on my desk. He says, you and I know this is not the way it is. So why are we running the story this way? And why did we send our best camera crew to get the B-roll? Why are we doing the things this way? And his boss said, who ran the TV station, ran CBS at the time, if I remember correctly, You have 3 boys to put through college. You'll run the story according to the talking points in the memo on your desk." And he hung up the phone. So, of course, I was real curious. Well, if you've got this memorandum, we're talking with all these talking points that are a bunch of baloney, where do they come from? And he wouldn't tell me at the time. He said he'd have to shoot me. So on the way out of his office that day, about an hour later, I really pressed him. I said, "Come on, Jim, tell me, where do these talking points come from? You got to fill me in. I'm not leaving here till you tell me." And he said, "Okay, it's a 3-letter agency, 3-letter intelligence agency." I said, "Does it begin with an F or a C?" He says a C. So I left that day thinking, all right, Operation Mockingbird Media. We know about these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really my true to life confrontation with Mockingbird Media, a CBS memorandum, and a guy, a program and a news director who's got to run a story he knows is a bunch of baloney. It happened to be the Ferguson, Missouri, and Michael Brown story. So, Vem, this is 2023. We're 25, 30 years past these events that I experienced, but nothing's changed really and truly. They still construct the narrative. They still have their talking points to fit their agenda. It's still a Luciferian cabal that's running the show, and the CIA is still involved in the so-called 4 a.m. talking points. I think a lot is changing in the past 18 months, 2 years, and I do believe the mainstream media is on its last leg. I do believe they're dying. The mainstream media, as we know it, won't be around in a couple years. They're gonna have a fatal death that we'll all watch in real time. We're watching it. CNN used to have 3-4 million homes in prime time watching CNN. Now they're lucky to get 400,000 or 500,000 homes.
Yeah.
So they're dying. They can't get an audience anymore. And I submit to you that you and I and all the podcasters in the Truther alternative media, we are the mainstream media now.
Yeah. So you think that really they're on their last legs? They're about to be put out of their misery at this point?
Yeah, I really do. I'll give you a couple little anecdotes. They're both concerning CNN. When I don't remember his name, the guy that used to run CNN, he was a Trump hater. Jeff Zucker. Jeff Zucker, thank you.
Yeah. Which, by the way, quick note, he was a reality TV show producer. Which
right, exactly.
I remember hearing that he was hired at CNN, and I was like, wow. That's I already knew there was a shtick going on right there, because you don't hire a reality show producer to run a news network. And it was very obvious that they're going to produce their news like reality, hence and therefore it's complete BS.
Right. Speaking of, before I forget the thought, you were talking about Stanley Kubrick. This thought will leave me if I don't tell you now. His deathbed confession was Apollo was his best movie ever.
Wow.
The moon landing was his best production ever. He produced the whole thing, right? It wasn't real. Another false flag event, right? So Jeff Zucker leaves CNN it's right now, I'd say about 14, 15 months ago. Unnamed executives at CNN that I am still in contact with. One of them called me and said, "I got this memorandum today that there's a new management group in charge of the network that's going to oversee the day-to-day operations." And he read me part of the memo. At the end of the memo, the last line was, "President Trump has his hands on this management group." What does that tell you?
Wow.
Who's really running the show at CNN? Fast forward to literally a month ago, the CNN board of directors and executive management team had a meeting. They met with regards to the subject. Should we sell CNN now while we can still get a buck for it? They were all contemplating just selling the network and putting themselves out of their misery.
Wow.
They concluded the meeting in less than an hour. As one executive said, "Now's not the time to sell the network. We couldn't even get $100 for this network."
Wow.
That was a quote from an executive. "We couldn't get $100 for CNN." So, yeah, I do believe they're on their last leg. I do not believe they're in total control anymore. I know this is a stretch for a lot of people to believe that somehow the military The white hat military, not the military generals we see on TV, not the military beholden to the Biden administration that are appointed by, Joe Biden with Barack Obama in the basement calling the shots, right? The white hat military, I'm talking about guys who, when Kennedy was assassinated, there was a group of military generals who got together, not just in the United States, globally. And they said, we've got to do something about this cabal, this, Luciferian. They knew all about the Luciferian cult that let's face it, it's the central banking families, the bloodlines that own the central banks, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Paysours of France, the JP Morgans. These are the people who call the shots. And when Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, they formed a group to go after and take down the cabal. Now, they've been working 60 years at this, Vem, and I submit to you, they now have the cabal in checkmate.
Are you sure? I mean, is that a real story that there is this group of individuals that have been pursuing the cabal for the last 60 years?
These are not just stories that I've heard over the years. These are things that have been confirmed to me with contacts related to military intelligence, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Treasury. Contacts I have that have confirmed, yes, there is. They call themselves the Alliance. That's the word. The White Hat Alliance, I call them. They have been operating since the 60s with the help of other groups. There's a group, Jason Shirka, who's got a pretty big following these days, content creator with a platform called Unified. Jason Shirka has been interviewing a guy named Ray from an organization called the TLS, which I forgot what TLS stands for, the Light System or something like that. They have been helping this White Hat Alliance. I know other groups. I've gotten confirmation from Master Lama Rasaji. He's with the 3,000-year-old lamasery out of Tibet. They are a group of 12th degree black belts. They're experts in martial arts. He's confirmed to me they've gone on missions in the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases, where they're rescuing children. And the reason they bring these lamasery Tibet monks with them is because one monk can take on like 40, 50 guys. He's that adept at martial arts, of all kinds of martial arts. Wow. And in hand-to-hand combat, nobody can take on these Tibetan monks that are from the 3,000-year-old lamasery. So I've gotten too many stories, too many tidbits, too many pieces, Vem, where there has to be some alliance fighting the cabal. And I submit to you, if there wasn't, wouldn't Trump already be in jail or dead? Wouldn't they already have disposed of the Donald Trump? Wouldn't they already have disposed of Vladimir Putin? Wouldn't they have already rid themselves of their enemies that if they were in total control? So I do believe this White Hat Alliance exists. Call it whatever you want. It's not just military generals. It's good political forces, civic leaders, business leaders. It's a group of good people that have been operating now for a couple of generations working against this deep state cabal. And we can only hope that everything I believe I've heard is true, is in fact true. And if it's not, look, only one side can win, right? It's God versus Satan, deep state versus we the people, and good versus evil. Both sides can't win, Vem. If they win, if they get their central bank digital currency and their World Health Organization calling the shots globally on our health, that's it. We are in our one world government and we're slaves. We're done, right?
Yeah. You're okay. So you're saying that Trump is the head of the CNN group? Is that what you said earlier? Or
No. That the management group that was running CNN, that Trump had his hands on them.
What does that mean?
Well, that the management group running CNN has Donald Trump's input.
So he's part of, like, I don't get it, but CNN attacks him so much.
Yes, because they're still playing out the narrative. You know, what I can explain to you is what I've been told. Again, nothing that I could validate and show you paperwork and
Mhm.
proof. I
Mhm.
can't show you a video, can't show you papers, but in fact, there is paperwork to prove Donald Trump wrote an executive order that left the military in charge, continuity of government. Before
Mhm.
he left office, he left the military in charge of this country. Joe Biden has extended those executive orders. He just extended it the other day.
Mm.
Why would Joe Biden extend the executive order leaving the military in charge when Joe Biden knows the military is divided between good guys and bad guys? This alliance I've been talking about, and then
Mhm.
the bad guys. Joe Biden has extended other Donald Trump executive orders that make no sense. So I have been told that the last 3 years since they stole the election have been about exposing this cabal agenda to the sleepers, to the
Mhm.
people who have been sleeping, so that the economy, the open borders, even the mayor of New York is saying that these illegal immigrants are going to destroy New York. This is
Mhm.
a Democrat mayor who's as much a part of the deep state as anybody, and he's screaming now loud and clear that these illegal immigrants. So the open borders, the economy,
Mhm.
the complete loss of energy independence, the woke agenda in the schools with critical race theory and the transgender BS they're throwing at us, at our kids. This is all being allowed to happen. I have been
Mhm.
told this is all being allowed to happen to wake up the sleepers. There is a woman, Dr. Jan Halper, that's been making the rounds. Look for a video she did with David Nino Rodriguez. She's a
Mhm.
DOD contractor. And she said, in fact, her work with a group of people is to surveil social media to get a pulse on the American people. And she said, we're feeding back the military this information, watching all of social media 24/7. There are 6 of us watching social media, feeding the military intelligence of the pulse of America. Why? Because at the right moment, they will take down the cabal. When they think, I've heard 2 numbers, 70% and 80%. When they believe that 70 to 80% of us are awake in this country and will buy into a military extraction of Joe Biden from the Oval Office, a public arrest of Joe Biden, of Barack Obama, of Hillary Clinton, that they are going to act upon that. Factually, in 2015, the military wanted to take many former military guys have confirmed that in 2015 the military was split. Half the military wanted to take Obama out. They wanted to arrest him, publicly shame him as a foreign enemy,
Mhm.
as not a real president, a Manchurian candidate, right? But they decided not to. Why? Because we'll have civil war in America. And I believe they were right. In
Mhm.
2015, had they taken Obama down, we would have had a civil war. Think about the BLMs and the Antifa
Yeah.
and all the power and money they had back then. Just 7, 8 short years later, we're on the precipice of the military believing they can take down this cabal without a civil war,
Mm.
without resistance from the American people. That we're supposedly about 70%, not all awake, but to the point where this nation would not have a civil war if they took Joe Biden out. And they're seriously, the talk is to extract Biden, arrest him publicly. You notice they're going after Obama now.
Mhm.
Obama's in the news a lot now. Tucker Carlson's recent interview, I don't know if you saw his
Mhm.
interview with this guy, Larry Sinclair,
Mhm.
but it was timed. It was not a coincidence, the timing. That interview was released now because the White Hat Alliance, which controls the good guys in the military, the good people in the media, the good people in business, these multinational corporations have been run by a satanic cabal too. But there
Mhm.
are some good people in every facet of our society that have been working in concert. And I happen to believe, I choose to have hope and confidence that these guys are in a good position to take this cabal down and that we may see something as early as this year, Vem.
I mean, I hope so. I hope so. The only thing that I'm, I just have to put out is I think a lot of people uh, count on things like that to happen as opposed to taking local action. And I think even if that is happening, even if Joe Biden in a month is going to be arrested and, hundreds of congressional members that have committed treason are going to be arrested and all this stuff, we still have to keep up local action. We still need to
Absolutely.
put sheriffs in place that are willing to uphold the Constitution, who have the power to arrest a lot of these treasonous individuals and make our lives so much easier, including, corrupt, judges and, of all kinds, So, I mean, I think we still have to really focus on the local aspect of all this
And
while, I hope that what you're saying comes to fruition. I mean, I think a lot of us do.
because of what you're saying, Vem, is one of the reasons General Flynn will not expose this White Hat Alliance and the work they're doing. General Flynn says local action equals national impact.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 areas on a local level we have got to get right. We've got to put in sheriffs that are constitutionally oriented and will back the Constitution. We got to have a school board that will uphold American values and education. We got to have city halls and mayors and city councilmen that have our values, and we got to have a county board member, right? So at those 4 levels, we need to keep throwing punches. We need to be in the ring swinging. I talk about this every week on Sovereign Radio about the need for local action. I agree with Flynn. Local action does have national impact. There's people working in Arizona, in Michigan to take the elections, to get the elections reversed. I'm working with a group that's canvassing, literally going door to door, canvassing, uncovering election fraud. And we take the affidavits that are signed by homeowners. You go to a door, you knock on them, you say, 30 people voted from your address. Are you aware? And the man says, no, it's not possible. Just me and my wife live here. They're a 70-year-old couple and they live alone, and yet 30 people voted from their address. When you show them the facts that you have the voter rolls and you can show them that 30 people did use their address to vote, they're pissed off. And they're willing to sign an affidavit to that effect that only 2 people voted. We're taking these affidavits, we're bringing them to the sheriff, only constitutional sheriffs. You're familiar with the CSPOA, what Sheriff Mack's doing with the CSPOA?
Yes. Constitutional Sheriffs
Yeah.
Association.
So Sheriff Mack and I are pretty close these days. I've had him on the show a lot, and I'm working with him on a strategic initiative to make sure that county by county, the 3,000 counties in America, we get constitutional sheriffs. Sheriff Mack will tell you only about 10% of our counties right now have true constitutional sheriffs. So we got a lot of work to do. People have to go to their school board meetings. They got to take down, look what Merrick Garland did with the parents that were going to school board meetings and attacking their school board. He made them domestic terrorists, right? He wrote a letter to the FBI saying these parents going to school board meetings should be treated as domestic terrorists. So we know we're over the target when they do that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, all right, let's talk a little bit about, before the show began, we were talking about all the conspiracy theories that have turned out to be conspiracy truths, because I think the viewers have to really understand how much of a scam has been run on the American people for so long. This JFK assassination, the RFK assassination, the MLK assassination, 9/11, what happened in Hawaii, COVID-19, like all of these, the October 1st shooting, I mean, in Las Vegas, all of these instances resulted in Americans perishing, right? So we're dealing with whatever government deep state apparatus that, more or less looks at us like useless eaters, disposable.
They sure do.
Yeah. I mean, being in Hollywood, tell me a little bit about what you've observed as far as the alliance between what is happening in Hollywood and these deep state Kabbalists.
Well, we got to go back to the fact that they controlled the media. So let's take an average 55-year-old in America who's been watching mainstream media since they're 5 or 6 years old. So you've been watching mainstream media for 50 years. Even I'll include Fox News because Fox News is mainstream media any way you look at it. They're
Yeah.
no better, no worse than the CNNs. So we have been so conditioned. Even the term conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, was created by the CIA to defame us, to minimize us, to take away from our voices, right? So the problem we have, Vem, is all of us are fighting this conditioning of 50, 40, 50 years of conditioning of being told this is the way it is. This is the way things are. This is how things happen. That 9/11 was, some Muslim terrorists, that Lahaina was a fire that just happened organically. We have to shake off this conditioning of our 40, 50 years, depending on your age. I'm assuming your audience is older than 35, right? So that be the case, they've all been listening to mainstream media for 30 plus years. And it's very hard to shake off that conditioning. Even if you don't believe it anymore, you still hear it. It still plays on your subconscious mind. So to say that JFK was an inside job, by the way, George Bush Sr. involved in that plot, to say that 9/11 and Lahaina were somehow inside jobs and our government had a role in it, it's very hard to shake off this conditioning of 40 or 50 years to believe it. And if you combine the fact, we all agree it's a satanic Lucifer. The 1%ers that run the world are Luciferian. So nothing is out of order to them. They're capable. In fact, they get off on these mass deaths in Lahaina. They get off on jabbing millions of people and watching them suffer. This is their pleasure. It's a source of pleasure for them. So we have to first shake off this mainstream media narrative. Cognitive dissonance is a very powerful thing, isn't it? Yeah. We don't want to believe. I've had this conversation. I have an older brother. He's 66 years old now. He does not want to believe anything that's outside of the mainstream media narrative. And he tells me logically, I do believe 9/11 was an inside job. He says, I do believe something other than what we're being told happened in Lahaina. I do believe that JFK was assassinated was an inside job. But I have no proof and I have no other context but what I've been told by our media. And our media can't be that bad. They can't be that bad. He doesn't understand it's a Luciferian cult. So, this is the problem we have is how do we shake the sleepers? How do we get people out of their slumber? For you and I, it's second nature. As to what I've seen in Hollywood, look, I've seen things I wouldn't even talk about. Generally speaking, I'll talk about them. I've seen adrenochrome. I've seen the use of it in Hollywood. I've seen sexual abuse of teenagers. I was working with James Brown, producing and syndicating a TV show called Living in America. He had this big hit, Living in America. The music industry, the James Brown management team, they all wanted to capitalize on Living in America. So we did a TV show, syndicated it around the country. And while I'm backstage talking to his backup singers that were always in the back of the stage, he had backup singers in the front of the stage that were in their 40s, and these two girls that sang in the back of the stage that looked in their 20s. But when you get up close, backstage, without hair and makeup, I'm talking to these girls. I ask them point blank, how old are you? And they tell me, they look at each other, they kind of giggle. Okay, we trust you. We're 14 and 15 years old. What's the significance of that? There's no parental guidance on this tour with them. And James Brown is grabbing their ass, pinching their nipples, talking dirty to them, and I see them go behind closed doors with James Brown.
Yeah. So, but could I make a point there? The thing that I mean, because I've observed things like that, and the thing that kind of disgusts me about all this, and Michael Jackson, for example, those kids had parents a lot of the time, and the parents were not being necessarily the best parents. Just like, would you drop your child off at a location knowing what's going to happen? And I'm not saying that was the case with these two particular ladies, but the point I'm trying to make is a lot of the time you have parents encouraging that kind of behavior, even though a child's underage.
I agree. They're in a dream spell. The
Mm-hmm.
parents of these girls were probably out bragging their daughters are on tour with James Brown, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
they're so successful, they've already hit it big time, that they're on tour with James Brown. The kids that were allowed to hang out with Michael Jackson, the parents probably thought this is wonderful for my
Yeah,
kid,
yeah.
So the parents are in a dream spell. They're subjected to the same indoctrination and the media, Hollywood. It's pretty fascinating. You got to give these people credit. They're brilliant. When you take the mainstream media, we'll call it the news, you take Hollywood and the music industry, and they're all working in concert to deliver this idea that these are people to look up to, right? That we should look up to Michael Jackson. We should look up to entertainers,
Yeah.
look up to the Kardashians, look up to professional athletes. Pro sports is now subject to the same bullshit as
Yeah.
we noticed with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, and that all begun the infiltration and subversion of professional sports by the cabal. I know some hockey players, they're probably the most down-to-earth guys, professional hockey players, who will tell you they don't want any part of LGBTQ night and would not wear the jerseys in warm-up. They were told in warm-up you're wearing LGBTQ jerseys. These players said, "The hell, I'm wearing the jersey. I'm not going out for warm-ups." They stood their ground. So fortunately, there are a few good people inside Hollywood. We know Mel Gibson. Look, Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel, right?
Yeah.
They broke away from the dream spell of Hollywood and all that it had to offer, fame and fortune, and they set a separate course. So we do have good players, but you and I know, having been inside the cabal machine, that they work in concert. They feed each other. The news props up Hollywood. Hollywood props up the news. The music industry comes in behind with songs and lyrics and videos that supports Hollywood, right? How many times have Hollywood and the music industry collaborated to create content that merely propped each other up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's insane because, I was a music video director, and for so many years, I remember being given songs that are clearly, sexually explicit, misogynistic, humiliating and degrading to women. And I just find it interesting that they're the ones making those selections, because those are the ones they want to make music videos for, which was my job at that time. And so I just find it very ironic that that same group of people that was pushing that, I mean, they're making the choices to select those songs, to then promote those songs, low frequency stuff, very destructive to teenagers because they believe and they follow that kind of, violence and sexually explicit kind of lifestyles, and then now they're telling us that, toxic masculinity and they're trying to say it's all the fault of the people. But when you actually have worked behind the scenes like you and I have, and you track this stuff down, it's no, they're the ones putting the toxicity into the culture and then blaming the people for consuming the toxicity.
Well said. Look, we're now finding out that I can't remember the guy that created the Muppets. Jim, you remember Jim's name?
Henson.
Jim Henson. We're finding out that he was using satanic overtones in the Muppets. That he was creating content for the Muppets that was very explicit with satanic overtones. So it's really infiltration and subversion at every level, from the time we're kids till the time we're teenagers. I'm curious. I'd like to have you on Sovereign Radio to talk about your years making music videos, because you must have seen and heard a lot of things that were very disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, it was a toxic business. I would say it was a very toxic business at the time, because it much better than today. That's what's crazy. I look at it today and I'm like, wow, it's even gotten a lot worse, like exponentially worse, because it wasn't that bad, but it was still, I mean, I was a music video director, and all the songs that I got, I'd say 80% of them were, the content of it was anything but positive for a better country, a better future, a better example. It's almost like when people say you look at Chinese TikTok and wow, all the kids over there are following intellectual pursuits, and it's very obvious that that is a country at least that looks up at intellectual pursuits versus our TikTok, which is basically a brothel more or less. I mean, that came from somewhere. And though that kind of music that was being put into the public, I think had a lot to do with it. And so at the time, as a music video director, even though I love music, I actually stopped listening to music for that almost decade that I was writing on music videos, you know?
Well, as a professional, as a music director and a professional, you had to do your job and do your best, knowing you were dealing with content that was anything but positive, as you call it, low frequency stuff.
Yeah.
So what did you do? You took the project and the scripts and the music and the storyline, and you ran with it, and you did the very best you could to produce a good content, because it was your reputation on the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Mercedes hires me to go negotiate a network sports deal with their advertising dollars, I got to dig in and do my best job for them, get them the best bang for their buck, right? I got to look in the mirror too. And by the way, I really wasn't awake until I was 50, 51 years old. And at that point, I'm like, what if I get out of mainstream media and stop what I do? What do I do for a living? I have a daughter to put through college now. And my dad told me one time, he was a TV producer, and I was sitting in Art. You remember the name Art Linkletter?
Yeah, totally.
I'm sitting in Art Linkletter's office with Art Linkletter, Arthur Godfrey, and Carol Channing. And Sammy Davis Jr. came in the office. They were hugging him, kissing him, loving him. The minute they walked out, they were calling him terrible names, the N-word, the K. They were calling him a kike because he had converted to Judaism. Just all the stuff I saw in that office that day, one day in their office, I asked my dad, how the hell do you work with these people? And he gave me the same line. Hey, if you remember, buddy boy, I got 4 kids to put through college.
Yeah,
so
totally.
what was he supposed to do? What were you supposed to do as a music director, a music video director producing music videos, when you looked at that script and you looked at that music and you said, this is very bad stuff? You still had to do your job, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, what it is, I think the understanding the overall significance of all the pieces, because that, you know, you're in your bubble. You're like, all right, the music sucks. It's low frequency stuff. It's not as daunting, I guess, until you realize what is going on in a global level, the entire story. Now, I got to tell you, doing this podcast where I've interviewed people like you, people that are experts in intelligence, doctors that could talk about the COVID situation, lawyers that talk about the fraud of the bar industry, and understanding all the pieces. Now I see the construct, right? And the construct of this evil death machine, for the lack of a better term, because, you know, we talked about all these conspiracy truths, all, you know, what happened to presidents, presidential candidates, populations, people in buildings. And when you put that all together, you realize, okay, there's like an evil death cult here, basically. You know what I mean? That looks at us like at any time we could be destroyed, obliterated, if it fits their agenda. So that all of a sudden, that when you look at it on that level, it's not so much I'm a music video director anymore. At that point, you're like, wait a minute, I am actually one of their soldiers, and I don't even know I've been recruited into their army. So you look at, you know what I mean? That's where you make your choice between good and evil when you see the big picture.
Right.
In a way, ignorance is bliss, because I'm sure there's plenty of music video directors out there not knowing that they're essentially working for Lucifer. But, you know, we took our journeys the way we took our journeys and found out the things we found out about, you know, and that brought us here. I mean, you know, there's a topic that kind of makes me almost uncomfortable. You were mentioning earlier how your father believed that Peter Jennings was an anti-Semite, right? And this is an issue that I run into a lot when I'm doing this podcast. There's actually an episode coming up with a gentleman that talks about this group. I believe it's like a committee of 300. How you know, he believes that they're all Zionists, but they're not actually Jews, that they're actually using Jews almost as an instrument, as a shield to protect their Luciferian agenda, right?
I think that's very accurate.
That's yeah, and the thing that kind of makes me uncomfortable about it, I came up in Hollywood. A lot of my mentors were Jews. Growing up, in our household, like I actually studied Yiddish, and we big fans of a lot of Jewish artists, because if you're an artist, there's a lot of brilliant Jewish artists, and that was something that was common in our household. But then when you start talking about these Zionists that are Luciferians, and they're looking at us like useless eaters, some people will quick to w an anti-Semite for saying such things. But tell me, I mean, as somebody that has Jewish family, what's your opinion? How do you deal with that topic? All of the above.
Well, first of all, if you step back 10,000 feet and look down at the world, 99% of people are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the 1% that are the Khazarian Jews, the Zionists, or whatever label you want to give them. These are people that thousands of years ago had to make a choice, were given a choice to be Jews or Catholics or Muslims. They chose Judaism, and then they hid behind that, and they gave us a bad name, right? They brought forward not Jewish principles and values, but they hid behind the shield of Judaism. Mm-hmm. So, with the understanding that 99% of the world is good people, it's the 1% in Hollywood, in the music industry, in media, that I'm not saying that everybody in the music, Hollywood, and media are Khazarian mafia members and subscribe to the Luciferian cult. But generally speaking, at the top, at the highest levels of management, they are Khazarian mafia. They are the Kabbalists, the Luciferian cult that hung up a shield of Judaism to hide behind. It's as simple as that. So I don't mind talking about these things. I think they got to be put out there. And I think in the scheme of life, it's relatively insignificant, the fact that, 1% of the Jewish people, 1% of the Catholics, 1%, the highest levels of government, politics, media, Hollywood, business, corporate America, they're the bad guys mm-hmm. that we're fighting against. This is the globalist machine that you and I are doing this. Well, the reason we have these podcasts, right? Yeah. Is to expose their work. And, right now, I think the most important thing this world is facing, I think worth talking about, is the financial system. We have mm-hmm. a financial system of fiat money. We know Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. JFK signed an executive order to put us on the gold standard. Mm-hmm. He got assassinated right after he signed that executive order. Factually, within 72 hours, he was assassinated. This is the battle of all battles. We are either going to get back to sound money and an asset-backed currency, or we're going to get central bank digital currency. They may coexist side by side for a short period of time, but we can't live in a world with both. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's the most important issue of our day, because everything flows from the financial system. Yeah. Everything flows out of money, right? Money is the energy that makes the world go. Mm-hmm. Like it or not, it can have good energy, it can have bad energy, but money is the tool that guides every system, every process, everything we do. And I do believe I have good, sound sources that are telling me that this year we will see a return. We will have this financial reset we've been waiting for, that we will be returned to the gold standard. It's a little different than just gold and silver, by the way. Yeah. In 2009, Google Earth did a study of all in-ground assets that 209 sovereign nations have. And 209 sovereign nations, not coincidentally, signed something called the Basel III and Basel IV agreement, which compel these 209 countries to back their currency with assets. Only this time it's going to be all in-ground assets, gold, silver, palladium, diamonds, minerals, even agriculture, Ven, will be used. So nations like Colombia, they're not rich in gold and silver, but they're rich in coffee. Yeah. So agriculturally, they're a very rich country. So their currency will have value. What's the significance of in-ground assets being used to back currency? I submit to you, it's God. It's what God gave us. Yeah, it's God-given assets in-ground assets. And I think that's the real story of our time. You know, if we're forced to live in a central bank digital currency, cashless society, and the World Health Organization can say, lock down America, you all take the jab, and if you don't comply, we'll take you off the financial system. Then we're left to live off the grid. We have to live in sustainable communities off the grid. You know, how many people could do that? How many people figure out?
I have to point this out because this is, I mean, it's just so fascinating hearing you talk because I hope what you're saying is actually what comes to fruition. Now, we've heard almost the opposite, and I have to reference this episode that's coming up with Everett Triplett, right? Because what he thinks your endpoint and his endpoint is the same, which is that we are entering a new age that is going to be free of the kind of corruption and just horrible. You know, anybody that looks at this system it is a predatory system that feeds on the destruction of its own people. That's what it is, right? So he believes we are coming at a system that's what you are saying, which is, you know, ultimately it's like the Federal Reserve. And one thing I would, you know, also submit to you is the bar. Those two have to be, in my opinion, the bar is as bad as the Federal Reserve. I would even say it's the Gestapo for the Federal Reserve.
The legal system is the Gestapo. I would agree with you. Yeah.
And both of those have to go for us to really have true freedom, real constitutional values, right? What Everett was saying in his episode is that he believes that based upon biblical prophecy, that we should, all the righteous ones that are against this Luciferian agenda need to move to the mountains because there's going to be nuclear war. All the cities are going to be destroyed. And then we are going to enter this age of enlightenment for whoever survives. And I know that must sound like the most outlandish tale to some of the viewers out there. That's what he believes. He refers to biblical passages where Jesus says certain things. There's actually, it's kind of insane because there's actually, I believe, Jesus talking about essentially creating what sounds like a bomb shelter to shelter one who's living in the mountains from nuclear fallout. It talks about a big iron plate, talks about how, you know, you should face the wall, obviously, because, you know, you don't want fallout to hit your face. I mean, it's pretty detailed and kind of blew my mind in terms of what could be possible via prophecy. But what's your thoughts on that, on what Everett has been saying?
We know it's, again, we have the same end game that we're going to get to 1,000 years of peace and prosperity.
Exactly.
That's what the White Hats, this alliance that I've been talking about today, I've been told very clearly, Scotty, they're not trying to put a Band-Aid on for 10 years. They're not trying to make us whole for 100 years. They're playing for 1,000 years, biblically speaking, of peace and prosperity. So Everett and I have the same end game, just a different way of arriving at it. Listen, his scenario is one that's very, very doable. I mean, it's a practical that it gets so bad that the only ones who survive move to the hinterlands, right? That they hunker down in the hinterlands. The preppers and the survivors are those who know how to live off the land and hunker down and shield from the rest of the world. I think it's not a crazy talk to me, but I just don't think that's the way it's going to be. I believe this White Hat Alliance has enough control and enough muscle and enough weight. There's enough from sitting in my shoes. What I see is the same thing Everett sees as the end game, just a different way of getting there. That we're going to lose a lot more people. We're going to have people die from this jab. We're going to have people die from some more false flag events that might occur. But what a war means death, right? And I believe what the White Hats are doing, trying to minimize. The only reason Trump fast-tracked the jab was to keep America open and going and our economies going, because we all would have had to face the real adversity of living off the land. Had they gotten their way, we would have been locked down for years, right? They would have kept us in lockdown for years, forced us to take the jab, all part of their depopulation plan. But I do believe, and I want to leave your listeners with hope, Everett's just a little more, I guess, a severe, he has a severe scenario to get to the other side. Mine is a more hopeful one. Yes, people will die, but I believe they're going to make it as painless as possible. Look, I think this economy is going to crash. I think people are going to walk around for a week or so thinking they're destitute and broke. They lost everything in the stock market. Any money they had in the bank is gone. But then on the other side of this, there is a restoration. There is this 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. You've heard the terms Nasara and Jasara. I don't even begin to understand those, Vem. I don't know what those mean. I just do believe that we're heading for this 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, the biblical sense. And I don't believe it's going to be a situation where people head for the hills and the hinterlands, although those who do will be safe for sure. But those of us that don't, if we have 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of food and water, we'll survive the downtime. We are going to go to black. There will be a fade to black moment where this country looks like it's over, financially speaking and otherwise. But I think we'll come out the other side. So if you have 2 to 3 weeks worth of food and water and you can survive shutdowns for a couple of weeks, you'll come out the other side fine.
Yeah. And I have to it's just fascinating hearing you talk because this is such a great companion. I mean, I think a viewer to get a real full picture of what the possibilities are, where this choose your own adventure novel is heading. I mean, you guys both agree on the 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, which is a biblical prophecy as well. Right. He seems to think it's going to be more like he was very precise. He said 391 days that he feels we have to survive, and like I said, with the, nuclear bombs falling, what you're saying is that really a lot of people are going to convert. A lot of the, normies or whatever we want to call them are going to convert, and that's how they're going to come onto our side. And yes, some of them are going to, or a lot of them might die because of the COVID jab and other methods. But, he seems to think that all of those people are not going to convert and they're going to be basically destroyed by a nuclear disaster. It's a really interesting kind of way of, you guys are both arriving to the same conclusion, but
it's a different way to get there. Yeah.
And one other note was that, the first time that God punished the earth, essentially for Sodom and Gomorrah type behavior, I think was because of with the floods. The next time he promised fire, hence and therefore he thinks that these nuclear bombs are fire, which is very interesting. And then you put the movie Oppenheimer into the mix of things, and the timing of that, it's just really fascinating. And since we're 9/11 today, even though this episode's probably going to air a few days from now, let's talk about what happened there.
All you have to do is watch the video of somebody whispering in George Bush's ear. He was in a classroom when they told him something had happened. He reacted like, okay, I knew it was coming. He nodded his head like, okay, it happened. 9/11 was intelligence agency planned event, included the CIA, the Mossad, and there were definitely bombs that were put in the basement to implode the building. Why? It had a lot to do with destroying records, financial records that relate to military spending. Also has to do with the financial system. But again, another deep state plan orchestrated by the intelligence agencies. Really the same people that 9/11 did the Kennedy assassination, did Lahaina. It's all the same people, right? They're the same group of people that have executed all these things. It's inside jobs, as you call them.
Yeah, and if anybody's ever doubtful, thinks that these are, 9/11 conspiracy theories as opposed to conspiracy truths, look at Building 7. There's 1 and 2 falling into its own print. It should be enough because that literally never happens unless it's a controlled demolition. But then you have Building 7 that just falls, and then you have United 93 that looks like no other plane crash in history. I mean, we've seen plane crashes. Look at what happened to German wings, that flight that ran into the mountain. There's debris everywhere, but yet they're saying that this Flight 93 literally fell into the ground, and there's nothing. I mean, there's a little hole in the ground. And then you look at the Pentagon, and we still haven't seen a plane go into the Pentagon. Looks more like a missile. There was no plane parts there. So, I mean, the evidence is there for people that want to actually seek it out. And it's kind of like the COVID narrative, where, yes, if you sit down there and you believe the mainstream media narrative, you're going to be brainwashed a certain way. But if you decide you're going to get out of that little bubble and you're going to actually seek this stuff, it's all there. It's all there to show you that we have a deep state. We have a deep state that does this sort of thing and looks at us like we're basically nothing, more or less, you know?
And they came up with the term conspiracy theory to, to ward us off, to fend us off when we would expose the truth. So,
yeah. Scotty, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to the Blood Money podcast. Is there anything that we didn't want to touch upon that you want to mention in closing? Websites, places where people could find you?
Yeah, they can find me at sovereignradio.net. The show airs on Saturdays in the morning in Texas on a good old-fashioned AM conservative news talk radio. In the afternoon in California, good old-fashioned AM conservative news talk. And then it goes to podcasts on Monday afternoon. But you can find it all at sovereignradio.net. And closing thought, we didn't talk about Las Vegas. I don't know the details, but my understanding from my sources is that day there was an assassination attempt on the new Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, and that it went bad, and that the shooters that were attempting to assassinate a friend of America, a friend of Donald Trump, the new prince, the new king, that the shooters had to go into panic mode because their plot to assassinate MBS was going bad. And in order to throw everything off, they just started shooting into the crowd to attract attention, to get the authorities to run the other. They were cornered in this building. They were cornered and they put it this way. It was not random. This, again, was something that was a planned event that went wrong, and we'll never, I hope the truth, I say we'll never hear it from the deep state, but I do believe that all these things that are considered conspiracy theory, that we're going to hear the truth about all of them, Vem, and it's not going to be 5 or 10 years from now. I think in the next couple of years, I'm very hopeful that the white hats win, God wins, and we're going to hear all the truths come out.
Yep, I hope so too, from your mouth to God's ears, Thank you so much, Scotty, man. Really appreciate this. And thank you so much for the viewers out there for joining us for this episode of Blood Money. Make sure you check out americahappens.com. Make sure you consider supporting us by making a donation, because that's how we get this information out to you. So consider donating to us. Also, check out our shows like Daily Devotions, our morning prayer series with LW. Also, Blood Money 4 or 5 days a week. Our AHN News Live with Corinne Clifford, Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we bring you live news with independent journalists all around the country, and Conspiracy Truths with Mindy Robinson. And definitely check out her October 1st, 2017 mass shooting documentary that she did, which you could find on our website as well, because it touches upon a lot of the topics that we talked about with the October 1st shooting. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I will see you on the next episode. Take care. Truth in media is not free. If the corrupt corporations run the media, then all we get is a pile of lies. So please support truth in the media by donating to americahappens.com, by simply going to americahappens.com, clicking on the support tab, and entering a generous donation. Thank you so much.
Check out the America Happens Network, because Fox sucks now.